I am Hank Pattison, and this is The Life of the Mind, my little pop culture commentary podcast thingamabob. It is Monday. It is 6 p.m. I feel like I still have a little bit of a sinus congestion, which might be making my voice sound a little funny, but I don't think that's really going to change anything right now. So, I didn't actually think I was going to record tonight. I thought I was going to put it off till tomorrow, and I still might do some more. It's neither here nor there. I caught myself making some little comments on Twitter. Oh yeah, I'm on Twitter. HLH Pattison at I don't know Twitter, but I don't know. I caught myself making some comments on Twitter, asking some questions that, of course, nobody has any answers for, because what the fuck's the point of answering stupid, semi rhetorical comic book questions? Here's the thing I was thinking about the Christopher Nolan Batman movies, and if you're listening to this, you are familiar with me and my opinions, and you are rolling your eyes and debating as to whether or not you're going to keep listening at this point. But here's the deal the Christopher Nolan Batman movies. I think there are some artists who you can call bad. I don't think very many people are bad artists. I think the act of trying to make art is kind of a splendid thing. Anyway, so here's the deal. I'm not a big fan of Christopher Nolan's movies. I've watched a handful of them, and generally speaking, I'm always angry after I watch them. He has a style of telling a story. He has a style of story that he likes. He has a type of character. We have very different sensibilities. And yet, as I watch his career progress and I watch people resonate with his material, I can see very clearly that I would never sit here and say, I think Christopher Nolan is a bad director. He's clearly a great director. His work clearly has a really profound effect on a lot of people. And it's really cool that he gets to do such sort of huge blockbuster art pieces, art pictures. I'm not sure which I was going for there. Um, but I do not care for them. There's something about his style and structure, like I say. I recently was commenting to a friend that I think Christopher Nolan makes magical realism movies. I think that he sort of does works of fantasy in a modern urban setting. Sometimes, I mean, I guess he's done some historical pieces as well, which were also quite magical. And I don't care for that. That's just me. I'm not a big fan of the magical device in movies. So Nolan, he got to work with one of my favorite fictional characters, and that's Batman. Batman. I love and I hate Batman so much. He is one of the few DC characters I have read a lot about. And I mean, I don't know. I think the Frank Miller book, The Dark Knight Returns, is a really great comic. It's a really great piece of art. And I don't know if that means Batman is cool or if it means that at that point in time, Frank Miller was pretty cool. I don't know. I don't like to read a book like that and say, oh man, what a great character Batman is. No, what a great writer artist Frank Miller was. Like, the two are not the same thing. I have very mixed feelings about what makes a character great, what makes a fictional thing great over the non fictional identities that created it. So, Batman. Here's my question. Here's my thing about the Christopher Nolan movies is that each movie has a villain. Okay. The first movie, the villain is Ra's al Ghul. The second movie is the Joker. And the third movie is Bane. That's a very logical path to take with Batman villains. Normally everybody wants to use the Joker in the first one because he's a really big deal, but I like the idea that Nolan wanted to work up to it, that you earn the Joker by delivering a solid first movie. And then in the third, you move on past it and you do something sort of 90s and apocalyptic. I'm on board for all of this. I have no complaints. Where I start to have complaints is, I guess, when you start to get into some of the nuts and bolts of what I think the point of an adaptation is. I'm mainly speaking about comic book adaptations here. I mean, I suppose maybe this could be extended to novels, and I think once or twice songs have been turned into movies, but I really have mixed feelings about that. Um, so, if you're going to adapt a comic book, I I feel like you got to take your science nice and slow. And I don't mean your sci-fi science. I mean your science of storytelling. You need to think about what you're doing and why you're doing it. Okay, what are we doing? Well, we're making a Batman movie. Why are we making a Batman movie? Primarily, we're making a Batman movie to make money. Investors want to put money into entertainment that will entertain. So in another way, we want to entertain as many people as possible. We want to tell a Batman story that entertains as many people as possible. Okay. So when we're representing Batman, when you're bringing that to life, you sort of you have to strike a compromise between what are the ideal points of this character and where does that factor into marketing. But I don't even know if I want to talk about that because that's sort of depressing. But when you think about Batman, the comic book character, and you think about adapting him to film, I think what's important is that you have to boil down as many of Batman's pure concepts as you can and then figure out how those make the jump. And a lot of Batman stuff makes the jump really easily. I mean, his origin story, that he saw his parents killed. Like, well, lots of kids have their parents killed. Like, that's not a shocking thing in history. So, like, some of it all kind of makes sense. And then, eventually you wind up with a dude who dresses. People always say Batman dresses like a bat, but I mean, he wears a shirt with a picture of a bat on it. Bats don't do that. Bats don't wear capes. I don't even know what to say Batman dresses like, except to say he dresses like somebody in a Halloween costume who's super into bats. Eh, but I mean, hey, that's Batman. If you don't like that sort of thing, you probably shouldn't be working on a Batman story or buying Batman comics. If, on the other hand, the idea of somebody who is so mentally screwed up that he dresses up in a weird bat Halloween costume and beats the crap out of people, if you're into that, then maybe we have a movie to pitch to you. The villains. The villains of the Christopher Nolan movies. Ra's al Ghul in the comics is an immortal. Did you hear me sigh as I even begin to get into some of this? Ra's I know the least about. I just know he's an immortal. I feel like he's got a little touch of Doctor Doom to him. Like he's kind of a character who will use like magic, but sometimes it's ninja magic. I know he has these pools of regeneration that he soaks himself in. So when he dies, he can be reborn in them. So I'm not really sure exactly if he's eternal or if he's just a dude who takes an eternal bath every so often. There's the Joker. Maybe the Joker is where we're going to start to pick this stuff apart. Maybe that's going to be our path in on this. The Christopher Nolan Joker was a guy who wore clown makeup and had scars in the shape of a smile face up from his lips and across his cheeks. And he also wore a sort of extravagant yet ratty looking purple suit layered with all sort of colors and stuff. So in the books, the Joker is a guy who went through a industrial chemical accident and that bleached his skin to like bone white, and it dyed his hair green, and it turned his lips ruby red. I feel like maybe I'm quoting this from something, but I'm not actually sure. And I think it vaguely gave him a, what do they call that? A rictus grin? Like there was some nerve paralysis that caused him to always be smiling all the time. That comes and goes, I mean, I think they show the Joker taking on slightly different facial expressions from time to time, but I I feel like the point of the Joker, when you boil it down, is that he was somebody who was went through, like, maybe he was just like a minor level mob boss, or as Alan Moore suggested, an out of work comedian. At the end of the day, he was just a dude trying to earn a few bucks, maybe in a nefarious way, and then he was put through this thing, and it drove him insane. Like, that it was a chemical insanity, and as well, the incident was so shocking and traumatic that he never came back from it. And I really like that idea. More so than I like the idea, I feel like that's the core of the Joker. And as soon as you do that thing that Christopher Nolan did of like, it, it gets away with it a little bit better than other things might have to me, because at least he was altered in a way that he couldn't exist in normal society anymore. He was a person who looks so other. But at the same time, like, there's a part of me that feels like the Heath Ledger Joker, while it was an excellent performance and a very entertaining character, was it the Joker from the comic books? No, it wasn't. Was it a good representation of the Joker from the comics? No, it wasn't. So you get into one of those things where, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, this is a 10 in terms of, is this good? But in terms of, is this a good representation of the material? It's about a 2. So, I don't know, what does that average out to? Like a 6 or a 7, maybe? Certainly, well, I guess... Oh my God, I'm sorry. Did he win an Academy Award for the Joker? I forget if that's true or not. Maybe I should look that up. Yeah, Heath Ledger won an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for his role in The Dark Knight Returns. I mean, jeez. That feels... this is going to sound crappy. That feels a little ingenuous to me. That feels a little like, we're sorry you died, so here's a consolation prize. I mean, really? Was it that? Like, he was the Joker. Like, it's not like he was playing a real person who had real motivations. Like, he was just playing a crazy person who wanted to fuck with people. Was that really... I don't know. I saw Heath Ledger in Monsters Ball, and like, that was a complicated, nuanced performance of somebody who felt like a real person. I was really impressed by. I didn't even care for the movie, and I was blown away by Heath Ledger's performance in Monsters Ball. It was simply, I thought it was a very complicated and such a smooth handling of such a complicated character. And the Joker wasn't complicated. He never breaks down and cries that I remember. You're just a cool sociopath. I don't think he ever gets hurt or shows any kind of vulnerability until Batman punches him 3 times and then the movie ends. It's very confusing. But I know a lot of people really responded to it. A lot of people were very happy with it. So, moving on, then we go to Bane. And Nolan's Bane just wore... He went through some sort of an accident. You know what? Give me 2 seconds. So I just went and did a little bit of research because I was about to start talking out of my ass, and I would hate to do that on this podcast that nobody really listens to except for me. I am my number one fan. In the comics, the deal with Bane, is that he has venom, and that in and of itself is kind of. Marvel Comics has asked us to not call Venom Venom. At one point, there was a Batman story where Batman was using a performance-enhancing drug, sort of like a super steroid, and it was called Venom. And then later, Bane was a dude who had tubes that shot venom directly into his brain, which made him incredibly strong and tough. And he beat the shit out of Batman, and that's all ancient history now. In the movies, oh my God, I read this and then I watched a clip on YouTube. I still don't totally understand Bane's origin because they seem to switch context of who they're talking about a couple of times. I can't tell if they're talking about Bane's dad or they're anyway. In the movie, Bane got beat up really bad, and now he has to wear a mask, and the mask gives him painkillers, and the painkillers make him not hurt so much. Those are two totally different things. Those aren't, that's one of those is not an adaptation of the other. I mean, I guess it's an adaptation in that it's totally different. But like, man, just to be a hyper nerd about this, like, Bane's tubes didn't go to the front. They pierced the back of his skull. That's literally the opposite of like, where should I install these tubes on Bane's head? Well, in the book they say the back, so let's stick them in the front. Bam! We're doing whole new things that nobody's ever imagined before. So that's my big problem. That is not my big problem with Christopher Nolan Batman movies. I'm just of a different sort of visual and narrative sensibility than Christopher Nolan is. That's not saying either one of us is right or wrong. I'm just saying I feel otherwise, and I'm allowed to. I think he does some cool stuff visually. That I don't have a real problem with. Though, I mean, again, being a hyper nerd, I get all hung up on this stuff of like, I didn't like his bat suit. No, I don't know. I guess his Batmobile was okay. Again, like, I didn't think his characters were good real world representations. I know you can't just take the characters from Batman and shove them in the real world and it'll all look fine. I recognize that you have to adapt, that you have to change things, you have to sort of evolve them and alter them. There are things you can change and there are things you can't change, and there are things where if you change it too far, I'm suspicious that I said this on one of my previous podcasts about the whole like, if I have a recipe for lasagna and I keep making alterations to it, eventually it becomes a chicken pot pie, and that's cool, but it's not a lasagna. I can't show up to a lasagna contest with a chicken pot pie and say, oh, well, I replaced the noodles with a pasta shell, and I replaced all the insides and sauce the lasagna with a chicken pot pie. That's what it is. And I feel that way about the Christopher Nolan characters, that they're all fine characters, but they're not the characters from the books. I mean, I think the Joker, in some regards, you can make the largest argument for, like, at least, I mean, not the comic book Joker I guess maybe in the 90s he kind of did this a little more, but like, he wasn't a dude who walked around talking about chaos and being crazy. Mostly he just wanted to be rich and fuck with Batman. And I don't know, I guess this dude sort of did that. Again, I'm not trying to take anything away from Ledger's Joker, except to say he wasn't really the Joker. And in the same way of like Bane, it really annoys me that Bane has a baseline weakness and he needs I guess they said in the comics eventually Bane started having really bad withdrawal symptoms if he didn't get the venom. So that's sort of the same as to what the comic book character had. If you sever these hoses, I'm in terrible pain. Which, by the way, like, if you're sending a dude to be an unstoppable force to fuck with Batman, saying that he has two little tubes either going into his face or out the back of his head, and if you destroy those tubes, you defeat the guy. Like, what the fuck, man? Like, what's the that's a hell of a weak spot. Like, you might as well just say, like, oh, he's also a giant baby and he has a big soft spot on his forehead. So, like, he's totally as strong as Superman, except if you touch the top of his forehead and then you cave in his skull and he dies. Like, I. Bane is such a 90s character. He really is. I mean, he tries well. Does he? I think some of the idea of Bane is cool. I like the idea that Bane is the opposite of Batman. He was born into poverty and he nevertheless learned. He was an incredibly intelligent person. He had a very gifted, like, you know, his metabolism and shit were real good, so he could turn into a real big strong guy, and he was really smart, and he learned how to really kick a lot of ass. And the difference between him and Batman is Batman picked a place where he stopped. Batman was like, here I am, the pinnacle of human perfection. And Bane was like, I'm going to take steroids. Like, Bane's the power lifter of the two of them. Bruce Wayne is a dude who's really pleased that he can clean lift whatever, 500 pounds. Whereas Bane is like, no, I would rather get totally juiced and fucked up and lift two Buicks at the same time because I'm a bad motherfucker. And I got a lot of respect for that. I do, you know? I mean, we're all playing by our own rules there. I think Bane could be a really cool counterpoint to Batman, but I hate the idea that he has these two cords out the back of his head, especially if they're connected to his brain. Like, that just seems such a, like, hey, why don't you just yank those out? Then he'll be in so much pain he will not be able to continue having the fight with you, and there'll be holes into his brain so that you can stick your fingers in there and kill him if you want. So if I was redoing Bane, I might try to leave that part out. I might just have it that it's like, oh yeah, every 12 hours he just needs to, like, heroin needle shoot up some venom into his system. Maybe shoot it up like steroids. I guess not everything is about heroin. But yeah. Okay, and then who is our first character? Ra's al Ghul. Ra's al Ghul in the books, mystical demon. Well, he's not a demon, that's his name. But, like, there's an element of magic to him, and he is an eternal being. And honestly, the Christopher Nolan one, if I am supposed to believe that he has existed for thousands of years, I do not really recall getting that from the movie. If anything, it was just kind of a bait and switch of like, hey, everybody thinks I'm Asian, but really I'm a white dude. That's pretty cool, right? You didn't see that coming. I always imagine how inconvenient that would be as well. But I mean, just the idea that he's the leader of this cult, but to Bruce Wayne, he's masquerading as one of the lower guys in it. Like, how do things get run while he's doing that? Like, don't people, like, if you are running an organization like that, aren't there a bunch of daily things you need to do? But I guess the dude he set up as the Asian Ra's al Ghul was doing all the mundane day-to-day stuff while he trained Bruce Wayne or something. Anyways, he wasn't a magic eternal. And so again, I feel like I think the TV show Smallville got a lot of flack for this idea that a lot of times when people adapt characters or TV shows, like, you'll see this thing with a character where, like, oh man, it's the Flash, except now he's just a dude wearing a leather jacket that has a lightning bolt on it rather than a whole Flash costume. You see those kind of things where it's like, it's simplified into a patch and then the patch is put on a leather jacket, and that is the version of that character you get. And I sort of feel like the Nolans, they come close to that for me. They come close to being that bad, or like just that's not that thing. Like, you might as well just have a dude wear a t-shirt that says Joker on it. I don't know. Joker one is definitely the most contentious of them, I think, because it is an interesting take on the character. I think there's a version of it you could have written that didn't do the scars, that did, like, I think the idea, like, how much would that hurt to have this color bleached out of your skin, and what would that do to you afterwards? Like, I think that's really kind of interesting, and I don't like the idea that this dude specifically puts on clown makeup. I like the idea that he is just a fucked up criminal psychopath who is forced to look like a clown, that he would have to put makeup on over top of himself to not look like a clown, and like that he's trapped in that identity. Whereas Batman is all identity, getting back to the idea that all of Batman's villains are a counterpoint to Batman, like that's the Joker's tragedy, that he can't not be the Joker ever at all. He is the Joker inside and out. And again, like, you can make the argument that the scars were that, but the scars are not the same thing as the crazy facial deformity of what the Joker in the comic books is. And that's how I feel about that. That is how I feel about the villains in the Christopher Nolan Batman movies. Man, that's almost like a half hour of babbling just on that one topic and those three characters. But I think it's important. I think it's, well, obviously it's not important, but I mean, at the same time, like, a lot of people spent a whole bunch of money on those things, and I don't know. Again, it just gives me back to if you're going to do this thing, you can only change it so far before it stops being that thing anymore. And I realize you have to make some concessions, you have to make some adjustments, but I think if you were adapting something, you owe it to the original to keep some part of its initial integrity whole. And I don't necessarily feel that the Christopher Nolan movies did that for Batman. Or at least they didn't do it for my Batman. And again, then we wind up with this thing where, well, this is an excellent movie that a whole bunch of people enjoy. But is it a good Batman movie? I don't think it really is. I don't think those guys are really good Batman characters. Now, the Christian Bale Batman, that's a whole other kettle of fish. Which basically gets summarized to, I wasn't crazy about the design of the suit, and I didn't like his voice. I didn't like the way they wrote the character. I didn't like his actions, his inactions. The one thing I really, really loved about the Christopher Nolan Batman movies, and this is a good point to close on, my favorite concept about that Christopher Nolan introduced to Batman was when Batman was training with the crazy ninjas in wherever that was, northern China somewhere. I don't know. Maybe they told you. There's a point where they get him really high on some weird hallucinogenic drugs, and then a bunch of ninjas half attack him in the dark and push him down a hall until he opens up a box, and the box is filled with bats, and the bats all fly screaming in his face while he's tripping balls and was just attacked by a whole bunch of dudes in black. Like, and then he goes back to his hometown and develops a bat suit and decides to go out fighting crime. And there was a part of me that, like, I could imagine a friend who was like, yeah, man, I suffered this really weird tragedy. I was trouble getting over it. And a few months ago, I went off into the woods for a couple of days and I did a whole lot of acid. I did a whole lot of acid in the woods. And I saw the scariest thing I've ever seen in my life. And that is why I stand before you now, dressed like a weirdo pervert who has completely changed his life and dedicated himself to an irrational cause. Like, all of that makes sense to me. Bruce Wayne makes sense when he's kind of screwed up. And, like, specifically in that Christopher Nolan way of, like, that I got high on drugs and was attacked by bats. Like, that's my origin for why I'm Batman. Like, yeah, I was traumatized in my youth. And then when I was 22, oh my God, like, you were never going to believe what happened to me, man. Like, I don't know how high you've ever been, but I was tripping balls. And then this fucking ninja cult attacked me with bats. So you want to know why I'm dressed as a bat and beating the shit out of people in my hometown? That's why, man. I had a really bad time. You know those people were like, "Oh man, this guy, he was my friend, and like he was so cool back in high school." And like then one time I heard that he did all this acid and had a really bad time, and like now he's that dude with like 8-foot dreadlocks, and I don't know, wearing like a sundress made out of found garbage pieces. Like sometimes people go through an experience and it alters them. I like the idea that seeing his parents be killed in front of him altered Bruce Wayne, but then as well, getting super high and attacked by bats also altered him. I'll tip my hat to you on that one, Christopher Nolan. That was a great touch, and I really enjoyed it. And I'm gonna say that's what's going on here. I'm gonna say that was this episode of The Life of the Mind, where I did nothing except talk about characters from a film franchise that's several years old now that nobody really cares about at all whatsoever, because now we have Ben Affleck in the best Batman costume ever, which I'm sure will be an awesome portrayal of Batman. And we got all that Suicide Squad, and Jared Leto is the Joker, and a Joker who looks sort of way more like the comic book Joker, except he's covered in tattoos and like... So, you know, I mean, who cares about all this stuff that I just said? I'm commenting on ancient history. It doesn't matter. It's all in the past now. Just like this episode is for you and for me. It's all in the past now. So, yeah. Have yourself a nice day, okay?
Yo, Dress. Wake up, man. Wake up. What's wrong with you, man?
Yo, I had a motherfucking dream, man.
What the fuck was the dream about, G?
I dreamed that I was hard.
We're sorry, the number you have dialed is not in service at this time.